2-3, basic derivative rules. All right, so let's start out by talking about the constant rule. Oops, get my pen here. All right, the constant rule. The constant rule says, say f of x equals c, where c is a number. Okay, important, c has to be a number. The derivative is always 0. Derivative is 0. All right, so the derivative of any constant term will always be 0. If you want to see a proof, just so you believe me, the limit as h approaches 0 of f of x plus h minus f of x over h will equal, well, since we have no x here to substitute in, this is just going to be c minus c over h, which is 0 over h, which is just 0. All right? So the derivative of a constant, any number, 7, 14, 1,256, 7,000, whatever, doesn't matter. Any number, the derivative will always be 0. And there's a little proof of it. All right, so if I say f of x equals 5, and I ask you for the derivative will be 0. Doesn't matter what the constant term is, the derivative will always be 0. All right, let's look at the power rule. All right, let's look at the power rule. So let's say given f of x equals x to the n power, it's an n, not an h, to the n power, then the derivative is n times x to the n minus 1. All right? So let's say we have f of x equals x to the 5th. Your derivative following this rule, x to the n, so 5 is n, you're going to drop the 5 down to the front, times x, and then you're going to subtract 1, so it's going to be 4. All right, so your shortcut now for finding a derivative, because remember your derivative and slope are the same thing, instead of having to do the whole limit process as h approaches 0 of f of x plus h minus f of x over h, you just simply take your x of n, x to the n power, drop the n to the front, and then subtract 1 up top. So that's exactly what we did here. X to the 5th, I dropped a 5 to the front, and then subtracted 1, so that is 5x to the 4th. All right. Let's look at, say, an x to the 4th. The derivative of x to the 4th, you drop a 4 to the front, so 4 times x, and then 4 minus 1 is 3. All right, and this works all the way down. All right, let's do x squared. I'm skipping x cubed. X squared would be 2x. Now, the reason there's nothing here is because 2 minus 1 is 1, so there's an imaginary 1 here. Well, it's not imaginary, you just don't have to write it. It's an understood 1. All right. Now, and then the derivative of x. Okay, since there's technically a 1 here, you drop this down, and that's 1. Well, then 1 minus 1 is 0, and x to the 0 is 0. All right. And since x to the 0 is 1, you can just leave that off. All right. And then, of course, the derivative of a constant is just 0. All right, the derivative of a constant is just 0. Here's why. So technically, this is 1 times x to the 0 power. You drop the 0 out front. Now it's 0 times 1 times x. So this would be 0 times x to the negative 1. Well, it doesn't matter what x is, that is 0. All right, so that's the power rule. And always remember that the derivative of x is 1. All right, the derivative of x, x to the first, or just x, will always be 1. All right, now let's look at your constant multiple rule. All right, let's look at the constant multiple rule. So given f of x equals c, some constant c, times g of x, then the derivative is c times the derivative of g of x. All right, so for example, if we have f of x equals 7x squared, the derivative will be 7 times the derivative of x squared. So that's going to equal 7 times the derivative of x squared, which is 2x. So that's going to equal 14x. All right, so the derivative of 7x squared is 14x. All right, now let's look at the sum and difference rule. All right, so when you add functions together or subtract functions. So given f of x equals g of x plus or minus h of x, then the derivative of f of x equals the derivative of g of x plus or minus the derivative of h of x. Let's look at an example. F of x equals x cubed plus x squared. All right, the derivative of this is, all right, of course, you do the power rule, so you drop the 3 down. So this would be 3x squared plus 2x. All right, that would be your derivative of x cubed plus x squared. Now, say those were subtracted from each other. X cubed minus x squared. Then the derivative is 3x squared minus 2x. So really the only difference in the two is the plus here and the minus here. All right, so the sum and difference rule work the same way. Only difference is in the sum rule you're dealing with addition, in the difference rule you're dealing with subtraction. But either way, your derivative is basically the same. You take the derivative of the first one plus or minus the derivative of the second one. All right, so that's your sum and difference rule. All right, let's look at some symbols that y'all need to be able to know and recognize. All right, symbols. So we all know that derivatives equal slope. derivatives equal slope. It's the slope of the line tangent to a point. All right? So you can write them as what's called f with a little 1 of x. And how you say this, you literally say this, f prime of x. Right? F prime of x equals the first derivative, because you can have second and third and so forth derivatives. All right? You can also call it y prime, y with a little 1 right there. And you say that y prime. All right? You can also see this, which you say dy comma dx. Right? dy over dx, or just dy dx. And this is, you'll recognize this as slope delta y over delta x, because it's your change in y over your change in x. All right, so delta y over delta x. All right, so those are some things you need to be able to recognize. You can call it f prime of x for your first derivative. So like for instance, if I give you f, I could give you f of x equals 3x cubed. I could say, what is f prime of x? And you would have to know that that means take the first derivative, so it would be 9x squared. It would be f prime of x. All right. So let's go to the ticket in the door. All right, the ticket in the door. I want you to find the derivatives of the following. All right, number 1, f of x equals 5x to the 4th. Number 2, f of x equals 3x to the 5th plus 2x squared plus 17x plus 2. And number 3, f of x equals 2x cubed minus 3x plus 4x to the 4th. All right, so make sure you do these 3 problems and have them ready when you come in the door tomorrow. Good luck.